discovery of air vents and water wells that would have made it possible for people to live underground for years at a time.
These are huge, vast cities that have been cut out of the living rock themselves. Who exactly built them? The fact that Göbekli Tepe was built right at the end of the last ice age tells us that there is a possibility that there is a connection between these underground cities and the building of Göbekli Tepe and Karahan. It could have been the same people.
Is there a connection between Turkey's mysterious underground dwellings and the extremely ancient sites of Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe? Could both have been built by a pre-flood civilization? But if so, who would have had the ability to manufacture such sophisticated structures? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest the answer may lie within sacred texts that describe interactions between early humans and otherworldly beings. Uruk, southern Iraq. In the early 19th century, archaeologists excavating this ancient city unearthed clay tablets covered in a form of symbolic writing known as cuneiform. It remains the world's first known writing system. When the tablets were deciphered in the 1820s, they revealed a record of Sumerian daily life, names of important figures and rulers, and accounts of sky gods called the Anunnaki.
These clay tablets are 5,000 years old and more, and they tell of the arrival of the Anunnaki, the pantheon of gods. The chief was Anu. This is the sky god who came along and created everything. So the origin of the civilization on the planet came from the sky.
The high god of the Anunnaki, Anu, presided over the divine council. There were a multitude of beings that came to this council. They deliberated with Anu. They made decisions for humanity. They intervened in human affairs.
Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe are in an area that is well known for its mythology, which suggests that the Anunnaki were responsible for giving humanity the rudiments of civilization. It was said that they gave humanity animal husbandry but also agriculture for the first time, both of which we know occurred in the area of Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.
At Göbekli Tepe, there's a carving of these three handbags that appear above this bird-like creature. And what's fascinating about this is that you can find carvings of similar handbags about 400 miles to the south where the ancient Sumerians lived. And there, the handbags are held by these winged figures with bird-like heads called Anunnaki. And the bags are said to hold all the knowledge of the universe.
Professor Klaus Schmidt, the rediscoverer of Göbekli Tepe in 1994, actually wrote that he believed that the founders of Göbekli Tepe were the Anunnaki.
Similarly, the Bible also tells of early humans having help from beings who came down from the sky, called the Watchers.
The Watchers are the fallen angels who came to Earth and intermingled with humans. We are told that they are here to observe, and they're not going to interfere in human development, although some of them did. They're also seeding humanity with knowledge that will help us to progress.
Both the Watchers and the Anunnaki, who almost certainly were the same, have been associated with this culture at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan. And is it possible, therefore, that they are behind the creation of these sites? And if we consider the possibility that there was a huge cataclysm, the chances are the underground cities of Cappadocia, they would have been used as places of refuge.
As mainstream scholars struggle to explain how people living 12,000 years ago were able to carve out millions of square feet of rock from the earth and build sprawling megalithic sites? Could the answer be found in the ancient writings that describe our earliest ancestors receiving assistance from extraterrestrials? Perhaps further clues can be found by more closely examining the T-shaped pillars at the ancient sites and the curious features carved into them.
Karahan Tepe is really something quite spectacular. Absolutely.
Authors Andrew Collins and Hugh Newman have spent decades investigating ancient sites around the world and have made multiple trips to Karahan Tepe in southeast Turkey.
The last couple of years they've covered it. Only a small amount, but enough to provide some remarkable insights to what was going on here in southeast Turkey.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like this is pieces of a jigsaw that's just waiting to be put together.
In September 2022, Andrew and Hugh traveled to the site together in search of further clues as to just who built it and why. Upon their arrival at Karahan Tepe, Andrew and Hugh were joined by local researcher Taha Ozyavaz.
Taha,
Hi, Andrei.
nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice.
Hugh.
Hi, Hugh. Welcome to Karahan Tepe.
Thank you, and good to meet you. I'm absolutely astounded by this site, how vast it is, how immaculate it is, and how it is just literally one of the most astonishing places I've ever visited.
We are seeing also only 1% of the site has been excavated, and we are seeing only now this tip of iceberg.
But this is just, just enormous, everything that's here. We can see T-pillars going in every direction. Just think what is below our feet right now.
There are really very well carved pits and well carved pillars, around 200 T-shaped pillars, and some of them are visible on the surface.
And if you do compare it to the Göbekli Tepe, it's got the T-pillars, it's got the enclosures, it's got the remarkable 3D relief carving, the statues, the serpents and everything else.
There are incredible images of different animals and creatures of the natural world. What do they mean?
Most mainstream scholars identify the sites of Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe as temples of worship. Others have suggested that the round enclosures may have been used as corrals for animals, and that the T-shaped pillars once supported roofs. However, Klaus Schmidt, the archaeologist behind the excavation of Göbekli Tepe in the 1990s, was certain that the T-shaped pillars represent human forms, but with some curious features.
I think what we see when we look at these T-shaped pillars is abstract human beings, basically. The heads are the actual T-shaped terminations. The stems of the stones are the bodies. Sometimes we see belts around them. But what's so weird about these is that the arms here almost seem like an abstract animal as well. Perhaps a bird, perhaps a snake.
On the side of the T-shape, we do see the arm. And if we go down, we see the hand and the fingers. This is the interesting part of the hand. It has 8 fingers and it was carved perfectly.
That is intriguing. And this is a tradition we find linked with giants all around the world. Even in the Bible, we have the giant of Gath that had extra fingers. We have stories of Goliath and his family having extra fingers. We have stories of great Irish giant gods having extra digits as well.
And the fact that the Watchers, the Nephilim and the Anunnaki would seem to be associated with the mythology of this region suggests to us that they could be one of the builders of Karahan Tepe.
According to the Bible's book of Genesis, prior to the Great Flood, angels known as the Watchers defied God's will and came down to earth to live among humans. These otherworldly beings mated with their human subjects, producing a race of hybrid human giants that were known as the Nephilim.
most tantalizing small tidbits in the Hebrew Bible is found in the opening verses of Genesis chapter 6, where we hear the story of the Nephilim, who are described as basically being the hybrid offspring of humans and divine beings who are called the sons of God. Who were these sons of God? Legend expands and tells us that they were rebellious angels. But yet we must understand angels to not be spiritual beings. They're very tangibly physical. Or else how could they take human wives and bear children? Now, the children of these sons of God and human women became known as the hybrids called fallen ones. In Hebrew, the Nephilim. They existed in the days before Noah.
Aside from the Bible, religious texts can't talk about these demigods, these hybrids are the Hindu Upanishad. And if we look at Sumer, again, God's coming down from the earth, fraternizing with the natives, which are us, and creating a new race of people, half human and half extraterrestrial gods.
Yes, we can speculate. Were those who were to become known as the sons of God originally inhabitants of a place like Karahan?
Does the 8-fingered figure found at Karahan Tepe provide evidence to support the biblical accounts of giants existing on Earth before the Great Flood? And if so, might they have been involved in the creation of Turkey's mysterious sites, both above ground and below? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and claim that these hybrid beings not only built megalithic sites in Turkey, but all over the world. At the famous site of Stonehenge in Wiltshire, England, are concentric circles of massive boulders, each nearly 13 feet tall and weighing up to 25 tons. On the island of Malta, in the Mediterranean Sea, the Gigantia temples contain megalithic blocks weighing as much as 50 tons. And on the remote South Pacific island of Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, there are nearly 900 ancient stone statues that stand as tall as 30 feet high and weigh up to 90 tons. These ancient megalithic sites are thousands of miles from each other. However, the local traditions of the indigenous cultures at each location claim that they were constructed by giants.
It's fascinating that around the world, wherever you have megalithic ancient sites, there are local legends that the giants built these places. For example, in Pumapunku, they say it was built overnight by giants. They say Stonehenge may have been built by giants. In Malta, they are suggesting that all these megalithic walls and structures were built by giants.
To me, what's astonishing is that you have ancient sites associated with giants building them all around the planet, but you also have historical documents that talk about the unearthing of giant bones at the sites, like at Baalbek, Lebanon, in Stonehenge, in Sardinia. You have these historical documents that talk about giant bones that were unearthed. We have an account from the American Geographic Society in the 1860s where giant bones were unearthed and documented.
Until recently, the megalithic sites in southern Turkey were hidden beneath the earth and completely unknown even to the local populations. So no record or ancient legends exist to explain how they were constructed. But might certain details, like the 8-fingered figures and the large stone head found at Karahan Tepe, connect these sites with giants as well? Could they have been built before the biblical event known as the Great Flood, and with the help of the Nephilim, the hybrid beings described in the Hebrew Bible, as
as we go around the world, there's talk about a race of giants involved in the construction of these megalithic sites. Also, what can we say about this? Were these the descendants of the builders of Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe? And did their giant genes get passed down from this early era to these other megalithic areas around the world?
Curiously, many of the megalithic sites around the world have features that perfectly align with specific constellations, star systems, or celestial events. Stonehenge in England was built to align with the sunrise on the summer solstice, as was the Temple of Enlidra on the island of Malta. Pyramids in both Egypt and Mesoamerica were positioned to line up with the belt stars of Orion. And celestial alignments have also been found at Karahan Tepe, with the stone face that is positioned to align with the sun at certain times of the year.
One of the enclosures, structure at Karahan Tepe, points directly towards the sun as it sets at the time of the summer solstice. Another alignment is at the midwinter solstice at Karahan Tepe. The sun, just after sunrise on this date, would have illuminated this head so that anybody actually inside this shrine would have seen the head light up.
These are people who are now watching the stars, they're looking at constellations, they're seeing the movements, they're studying it. In a way, they become the first astronomers. And that would be perhaps what Karahan Tepe was, in a sense, an astronomical observatory. But at the same time, perhaps they're interested in certain stars because these are the stars where the Anunnaki came from.
Could it be that Karahan Tepe and other megalithic sites around the world were intentionally aligned to the stars to indicate that their architects came from somewhere far beyond Earth? Perhaps further clues can be found by examining one of the most curious mysteries regarding Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. The fact that both ancient sites were deliberately buried. In the Bible's book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 9, begins with a story of Noah and the flood, in which God unleashes a great deluge to rid the earth of evil. In Genesis, Noah is warned of the coming cataclysm so that he may build the ark and restart life on earth after the flood. However, a very different story is told in the book of Enoch, a controversial text that can be found in the Bible used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but was omitted in all other Christian traditions. In this version of the story, Noah's great-grandfather Enoch learns of the coming cataclysm long before Noah is even born.
The book of Enoch is sensational because he speaks of the first person. He says, "It was evening, then he heard a noise in the firmament, and two beings crossed him, and he said, they had not the breed of humans. So if somebody does not breed like humans, what are they? Non-humans." Enoch describes, "They brought me over the earth. I saw the round face of the earth." Enoch was taught by the extraterrestrials. When he came back down to earth, he told to the humans a gigantic flood would come and destroy everything.
One of the oldest religious traditions in the Middle East, Zoroastrianism, also teaches that it was not just one person who knew of a coming cataclysm. In the Vendidad, which predates all the books of the Hebrew Bible, a young priest named Yima is warned of a disaster by the god Ahura Mazda, who is often depicted seated inside a winged disc. Yima is instructed to share this information with his people, and even to build an underground shelter that sounds very similar to the ancient man-made caves that have been found in Turkey.
Emperor Mazda instructs Yima to build a vara. This is a huge structure, 2 miles long, 2 miles wide. An underground hall of sorts where things can be protected from the terrible winter. Yima was to hide a remnant of the people and an extensive seed bank. Also, a pair of each of the animal species. Once Yima is finished building the vara, he takes 2,000 people in, a representation of mankind.
So again, we have a warning to tell the people, get ready. This terrible cataclysm is going to happen. And these underground cities like Derinkuyu are huge. They are vast. They go many, many stories underground. There's all kinds of streets and rooms. So you have to wonder if these underground cities serve as a refuge for survivors of this cataclysm.
If a great civilization of humans and giants existed on Earth long ago, is it possible that they received advanced warning of a worldwide cataclysm by an extraterrestrial race? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest the evidence of such a warning lies in the fact that both Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe were not overcome by the sands of time, but were intentionally buried.
Archaeologists are now pretty well certain that Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe were intentionally buried. Why do you do that? Perhaps they knew of an impending cataclysm. The flood of the Old Testament, we're told, was premeditated. People had foreknowledge that it was coming and they were preparing for it, and they were trying to preserve elements of their civilization. It was intended for us to ultimately discover it later in the future.
Is it possible that the builders of Karahan Tepe buried the entire site because they had been forewarned of a coming cataclysm and wanted to preserve some record of a civilization that was on the verge of extinction? A civilization that was perhaps far different from our own.
There are legends from around the world that speak about a great, highly advanced, wonderful civilization that predated our own. We're familiar with this by names like Atlantis or Lemuria and the like. There are many legends from the Bible, the very famous story of David and Goliath. It is also said that in these days, many of what we today call angels walked among human beings openly. Now today, we call these entities extraterrestrials. When we see imagery from around the world and when we read about these things in the ancient traditions, we need to ask the question, is there some literal fact behind this? And when we look at these excavations today in Turkey, can we speculate that these were the remnants of that civilization?
These sites that we're talking about, these super ancient, super complex sites, they are telling us something. They're telling us about mythology being true. They're telling us there's a larger story to the history of humanity.
Now that Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe have been exhumed from the earth after being hidden for more than 11,000 years, might we learn that the history of humankind is much different than we ever imagined? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and propose that new excavations in southern Turkey suggest that these sites have only begun to reveal their ancient secrets. Şanlıurfa Province, June 27, 2021. Turkish Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy appears before the International Press Corps to make an historic announcement regarding the ongoing excavations in southern Turkey.
The Minister of Tourism for Turkey announced that we now have 12 sites, many of which remain to be excavated. And all of this forms part of what they call the Taz Tepeler culture. Turkish authorities have been making a series of announcements of new, incredibly ancient sites, incredible number of sites. We have at least a dozen sites now that are known. And what this is really reconfirming is that this was a major area of early civilization.
Since it was initiated in 2019 by Istanbul University, the Göbekli Culture and Karahan Excavations Project has determined that these ancient settlements cover a region that spans an astonishing 125 miles from one end to the other. This suggests that approximately 12,000 years ago, the area was an extensive and highly advanced metropolis.
This site is absolutely massive. What we are working with right now represents perhaps 1% of the entire site. And they're forecasting it's literally going to take centuries